Thank you for joining today's Lunch with Leaders, how the Sunnyvale and South San Francisco Civic Centers benefited from a holistic approach. Before we get started, there are a few chapter announcements, some upcoming events. Call for our local awards for this year is going to open tomorrow, and so stay tuned. Keep an eye on the emails. The open call will close on the 29th of February. Second, also save the date for the awards presentation that will happen on April 18th. Secondly, our first chapter landscape symposium is on the go and is planning for early June. And the open call for both traditional presentations, but also creative events would be released in the coming month. So stay tuned on that as well. Last but not least, our annual Sharks Hockey Night will happen in San Jose on the 29th of February. The registration link is available both in email and on our chapter's website. So if you've missed any of our past webinars, you can also go find the recordings on our chapter's website and on our YouTube channel. So as today's lecture, the recordings will be posted afterwards. Lastly, there's a couple housekeeping notes before we start. If you feel comfortable, please feel free to turn on your camera. It's great to see everyone, but just be reminded that please keep your microphones muted. Secondly, please utilize the chat function to submit any questions you have that you might have during the presentation, and we will save it for the Q&A session till the end. So without further ado, I will pass the mic to Krista to introduce today's guest speakers.
Thank you, Anson. And I hope to see all of you registered for some of our in-person events coming up. So Jake and Kent, you're also welcome to come join us at the Sharks Night. It'd be fun to see you there. So anyways, I'll go ahead and get our three great leaders joining us today introduced to you. First, we have Jacob Gilchrist. He's a landscape architect, a Bay Area native, and graduate of UC Davis. He is currently the Director of Capital Projects in South San Francisco, where he leads projects from police, fire, library, and parks and recreation. Before joining South San Francisco, Jake was a senior project manager with San Francisco Recreation and Parks, where he led renovations of Dolores Park, Bodecker Park, Balboa Park, Hayes Valley Playground, and Visitation Valley Community Garden, while also managing the Community Opportunity Fund grant program. With prior experience in the nonprofit world at the Trust for Public Land and the private sector with MIG, he remains committed to improving the public realm for people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds. He also lives near the ocean in San Francisco with his wife and 2 children. And then next we'll be hearing from Kent Steffens, the city manager for the city of Sunnyvale. He has a bachelor's from the Missouri University of Science and Technology, a master's in civil engineering from San Jose State University, and over 35 years of experience with public agencies, including 4 Bay Area cities: Sunnyvale, Menlo Park, Palo Alto, and Foster City. Kent has worked as a senior engineer for a Bay Area utility district and construction manager for the U.S. Navy. He started with the city of Sunnyvale in 2011 as Director of Public Works, was appointed the Assistant City Manager in 2014, overseeing special projects in the City Manager's office, and now appointed City Manager in January of 2018. Sunnyvale is a full-service city of 155,000 residents, 930 full-time staff, and an annual budget of $608 million. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Todd Coley. He is a landscape architect and principal with SmithGroup based in San Francisco, where he oversees regional teammates in Phoenix, LA, Sacramento, and Seattle. Todd has been practicing landscape architecture for over 26 years and has built work throughout the world and within the United States. Although Todd has project experience in healthcare, higher education, mixed use, and other project types, he truly enjoys public works where he can connect with not only city staff and city council, but also the community and understanding their desires and hopes. Something he wants to share today, which is something he wants to share today. Todd is also a past ASLA NCC Executive Committee member, where he helped us start this Lunch with Leaders series back in the summer of 2020. And so we are so grateful to have all his contributions and have him back sharing with us today. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Jacob to start the presentation.
Thanks, Krista. So I just wanted to introduce, really the background here was in 2015, the City Council in South San Francisco put on the ballot a half-cent sales tax measure, really to just address a bunch of aging facilities that we had in the city. The upper left is our former municipal services building, which our current Civic Center building replaced. Bottom left is our council chambers, and then to the right is our aquatic center. So the half-cent sales tax passed in 2015. I started with the city in 2017, right after SmithGroup was hired to be the architects for the first two phases of the what we refer to as the community civic campus. The half-cent sales tax was allowed for 3 lease revenue bond sales in the last 4 years. South San Francisco is, as our city manager likes to say, is really a tale of two cities, in that it's historically been a really working class city predominantly. I have family roots there, so all of these projects have been really near and dear to my heart. But it's also the biotech capital of the world, legitimately, with a higher concentration of biotech companies on the east side of South San Francisco, largest concentration anywhere in the world, east of 101. So if you haven't been east of 101 in South City in the last 10 years, it's worth a visit. Next slide, Todd. So as I mentioned, the phases of the Civic campus have been predominantly our new police station, which is the upper left, which we did along with SmithGroup as well. Some images of the Library, Parks and Recreation facility we'll share in a bit. Bottom left is a fire station that we're hoping to fund along with these other projects. And then just yesterday, we opened bids for our brand new Orange Memorial Park Aquatic Center, which are the two images down in the bottom right. ELS, in partnership with FWA, is the design team for that. And we got amazing news in that the bids came in 12% below our engineer's estimate, which means now I have money to build a new playground because we saved a bunch of money. So it's been similar to LPR, similar to the Civic Campus project where we saved money on the bid. This pool project has been a real relief. And I should mention also with LPR, which we'll be talking about more, which is what we call our Civic Campus. That project, we opened bids in the fall of 2020 with an engineer's estimate on the order of like 101, 102, $102 million. And bids came in $28 million low because of that weird COVID moment before the supply chain issues popped up. And that savings is what allowed our city manager and the mayor to talk to the rest of council about funding the Aquatic Center project. So it's really been we've been on sort of a lucky streak here. Next slide, Todd. This is our new community civic center. This is our new council chamber, which Todd will get into the details about. But I love this image. It sort of redefined the geographic center of the city and the heart of South San Francisco over the last 7 or 8 months since it's been open. Next, Todd. This is where the facility is. The bottom right is where we were just looking. And I brought this in here just as a reminder for all of you that, these projects, these civic projects especially, we're often solving problems that private developers can't with properties. And this is the property map, including easements for our community Civic campus. There were 7 property owners, 2 of which, when I took over these projects in 2019, I learned we didn't actually have the identities of 2 of the property owners. So I spent 2 years with our city attorney reviewing maps from the 1800s in calligraphy and working with old rail companies and old mining company to obtain all of the property so that we could build the project that we have. But this was a site that was largely undevelopable. Between BART, San Francisco Public Utility Commission, 2 high voltage lines from PG&E, adjacency to Caltrans property as far as El Camino is concerned, and just all sorts of soil issues and everything. It was really a site that was in the center of town and quite compelling from that perspective, but really a challenge for anyone else to do anything with. Next, Todd. So as I mentioned, we consolidated those properties. This is the current state of affairs out there, and we do have BART property running through the center of our project. And so if you go out there, you can see where we have no vertical structures and no trees through a swath. And it's literally because the airport Nobre BART connection runs underneath the property right up against the building. So below the building here is El Camino, and above the building here is BART. And we crammed that building in and made it as long as we could to fit all of our program in there. And then we're able to put the park on top of the BART tube. Go ahead, Todd. So the playground was a big priority for the residents, and Todd will get into that a little bit more later. But I also really wanted to focus on mirroring the ground floor spaces in the facility with the park and really having sort of outdoor spaces that reflected those. So the plaza outside the council chamber, the community lawn outside the event spaces, and then the playground outside of the main entrance to the building. The park really stands to serve the building, which as a landscape architect is rarely my favorite intent for a park. But in this case, we were consolidating 3 different really important civic uses, and we didn't have a lot of park space. So we have this playground that really we didn't intend as a destination, but it's really more of a neighborhood park because the adjacent neighborhood Sunshine Gardens does not have a playground or a park in the neighborhood, and they can walk and ride bikes here. And then it was also just like an outdoor respite for the larger civic facility, but it's become quite popular, and thus parking is a major issue out here, as you might imagine. Go ahead, Todd. And lastly, for my slides for the moment, these are the really the values of the park and the building that SmithGroup helped us come up with during the community planning process, and we kind of use these as a touchstone throughout the design, planning and design process for the project.
That's great. Thanks so much, Jake. Good afternoon, everyone. Todd Coley here. Before I start, I just wanted to mention that I have a few of my teammates on the line who worked on these projects, and from the SmithGroup side, on the holistic, internal design side, we had architecture, interior design, landscape architecture, and lighting on both of these projects. So hopefully that'll shine through here. So I wanted to reinforce some of the things that Jake said before we showed you some of the kind of built imagery. It was a long process to get to the bid opening. I didn't change the slide, but we had over 50 community meetings. I think it was closer to 80 to really listen. And we learned a lot through those meetings, mainly the 3 on the side saying community space, play and exercise, and ecological experiences. A year ago, I flew out of SFO and was able to see this image. And I just wanted to do this just as far as context. So when you're driving north on 101 to the city, you pass by Sign Hill, which says South San Francisco, the industrial city. And as I was flying, we continued to move and saw this long, narrow building. The building length is about 600 feet or 2 football fields. And as Jake was saying, The first phase was the new police station and Department of Safety. Second phase, which we're talking about today, is the library, parks and rec. And then the third phase, which we hope to work on soon, is the fire station. So that just helps give a little bit of urban context to what you'll see here. So this is an axon of the police station in the back, and then the library on the left, and the Parks and Rec Center on the right. And at the very intersection of Chestnut Avenue and El Camino is the City Council chambers. So as Jake was mentioning, we were to figure out the program and where to put the building. We have two 230 kilovolt transmission lines and the BART tube. So there are no structures on top of any of that zone of influence. And we really had to make the building quite narrow, which actually helps with daylight autonomy and energy, which is great. And it also gives a very good urban presence along El Camino Real. Part of the playground, we heard a theme of more nature and adventure. You can see the types of play and the play equipment. And these are some of the renderings that we had shown in some of our work preceding getting it built. This is a diagram of the playground, and in the back you can see the main lawn, and the building is on the right. Police is in the back left. But as far as the playground goes, there's 3 different age groups, 0 to 2 on the right, 2 to 5 in the middle, and then separated by a fence to the left is 5 to 12 year. This is the main kind of event lawn outside of the Parks and Rec rooms that are on the ground floor along the park promenade, and people can spill out into this main space. And one of the thoughts that we had is that there could be a movie night there at some point. In addition, in between the Parks and Library and Rec building and the police building along Antoinette, there is a Centennial Way trail that we extended finally. Now it's a complete 3-mile trail. It's 15 feet wide, and it has 2 fitness stations, water fountain, and places for respite along that. And it's a multimodal path, so it's biking and walking. Part of our process was working with all the disciplines and coming up with the right grading plan, looking at the indoor-outdoor connection, and part of that to help explain to the public as well as City Council was the use of models. So we used this model a lot, and even created larger models for the architecture to show what the City Council chambers would look like. So we're nearing the end of the project. We're still doing a few punch lists, but we hope to accept the project within the next couple of weeks so that the maintenance period can start. But here's an image of the built programmed central space. You can see the park promenade on the left that goes along the entire building face, and the playground to the top. Zooming in on the playground, 0 to 5 on the left side of that fence, and then 5 to 12 on the right. We have a lot of bioswales along the building, in the parking lot, and to the left of the bike parking. This is a shot from opening day that Swinnerton Builders took. And then the last shot for South San Francisco is that Centennial Trail, seeing those 2 exercise nodes and the playground in the back and the building on the left. So now, in order to stay on time, I'm going to turn it over to Kent for Sunnyvale, where he'll talk high level about our project, and then I can get into some more details.
All right, thank you, Todd. One of our primary goals for this project, and we did set out very early in the conceptual phase of this, in the community outreach phase, was to be a leader in environmental sustainability. What we achieved with this, I put on this slide, Building America's Greenest City Hall, which I think it is. This is the first city hall in the country that is both LEED Platinum and net zero energy. You can see the giant solar array that covers the entire roof of the building and then some. The project does have a microgrid, so we have solar, we have battery, we have emergency power, and we have PG&E power. Next slide. So to talk a little bit about scope, the City Hall project was part of phase one. It's a 4-story building with one underground parking level, about 120,000 square feet. Essentially, we consolidated 4 buildings from the campus. We demolished 4 buildings that were all 1-story buildings and built one 4-story building to really recapture a lot of the site. And so we are providing 6 acres of new open space on the site as part of phase one. We've put in a lot of off-street paths and added bike lanes. We have a Civic Plaza really on both sides of the building that I think you'll see some images of. And we also included an outdoor amphitheater. So next slide. This is aerial photo of what we started with. So our Civic Center campus was a collection of a bunch of different buildings. It's 26 acres, 1- and 2-story buildings. We had over 500 surface parking spaces, and the functionality of this site included our city hall, main library, and public safety headquarters. You can see on the right what the city hall building looked like on the top. We tore that building down. Public safety headquarters is still here, but we built an addition right next to it to include an emergency operations center. And the main library is ideally going to be our second phase of the Civic Center campus, where we replace that on site with a brand new library. Next slide. So as I look back and think about, keys to success for the project, it really was our community outreach process. And we did that in phases. We really started by just listening to the community. We had focus groups. We developed a vision and success criteria from input we got from the community that were adopted by our city council. We got a lot of feedback along the way. Workshops, surveys were done over a period of a couple of years. And then we also held a hands-on workshop where people got to put a site plan on the table and show where they would put buildings if we were going to build new buildings. As I look back at this process, one of I think the keys things that made the project successful is, we got a lot of input, but we actually did what the community wanted. I mean, we heard lots of different ideas, but we incorporated those ideas into the project. And so by the time we finished the master planning phase and had, some design work and some architecture, we had support from the community. We had 2 good options and people loved both of them. And so the hardest decision was which option, not should we or shouldn't we. And that was really made the project successful. Next slide. So some of those themes that came through for sure was preservation, open space, and trees. And I know Todd will talk more about this, but the image on the left, the site includes about a 2-acre community garden, and it had been on the site for a long time. We did not touch it. And there's a nonprofit group that runs the community garden. They didn't ask for improvements. They just said, don't bother us. Don't build a building next to us that's going to shade the land. And we're happy. We love this space. We want to be here. And so we did 0 improvements to those 2 acres on the site. The site has beautiful trees on it. And again, another theme was that there was a grove of about 18 redwood trees in one space, and we preserved all of those. And tree preservation was a real key thing in site planning. And I know Todd will talk a little bit more about that, but now we have a building nestled between mature trees that really gives it a finished look that's fantastic. So next slide. One of the unique things that we did is we transplanted 12 large trees. These were the two largest. These are camphor trees. And again, this is what we heard from a community group of tree lovers. They were active. They said, you got to save some of these trees. They're beautiful. There was, to get the size of the building we wanted, a certain footprint did disrupt trees. So in this case, we moved these trees across the campus from one place to another. They were replanted. They're healthy as can be. They've been in the ground now probably close to 3 years. They're doing great. And so we did this with 12 trees. And again, we got community support by paying attention to detail with this. Next slide.
Yeah. And Kent, just before I push next slide, for the landscape architects on the line, both of these trees, it took a few days to actually do this because they didn't have the right crane. Each one of these camphors was 350,000 pounds. So it took a lot to do that, but it was great to see and highlight the community's desire of keeping a lot of mature trees on campus.
So we couldn't save every tree. We did the footprint of the building. Actually, we did have to cut down some redwood trees, but we recycled them. So we took redwood trees from the site. We built furniture for the city hall, and it turned out beautiful. It's a hallmark of the building. It gives it a very warm, comfortable feel, and it's absolutely unique. So we have these huge redwood conference tables in almost all of the conference rooms and a few offices. And it's just a feature that, nobody's ever seen anything like it really, that really worked out well for us. So next slide. So this gives you an idea, again, some of the landscaping on the left with our large solar canopy that also shades the south side of the building to prevent heat gain in the summer. And so that's a functional canopy as well as providing power for the building so we could achieve net zero energy. On the right is just the phase 1 site plan. So you see the new city hall right in the center. The 4 buildings we tore down are removed, and then we're showing the finished landscape around the building that we did with the first phase. And we're at this point in time, I'll say we're almost done. I think they're doing landscaping on the south side. That's where the existing city hall was. We occupied city hall until we could move into the new one. And then in a phased process, we let the contractor demolish it. And they're finaling the landscaping probably within the next month or so.
Yeah.
I think that's my last slide, Todd.
It is. It was really interesting. One of the things in the master plan that Kent mentioned to our team was they didn't want to rent any swing space. They wanted to stay on campus to have all of their city services continue to come to this project. So the new city hall, I think, Kent, was built 15 feet away from the northern facade of the existing city hall. So anyone through COVID that came into the city hall heard pounding of piles and a whole bunch of construction noise. All right, so I'll get into a little bit of the master plan, a few slides on that to reinforce some of the things that Kent mentioned, and then I'll show a little bit of the process of the phase 1 design. So on campus, there's 725 existing trees, 90% of which are existing and protected, 113 redwoods. This is a plan of where those protected trees and kind of the special trees being redwoods were located. And part of that master planning process was really to try to figure out where would the 3 phases go. So there's a city hall is phase 1, phase 2, as Ken said, is library, and then the last phase is a new Department of Public Safety. And we had to balance those 3 footprints as well as the existing trees to keep as many of them as possible. Regarding the city hall, we wanted the redwoods to not only protect the building from sun and energy gain and heat gain. But we also wanted to be sure that the indoor environment of the city hall that has operable windows would able to draw in some of the cooler air from the redwoods into the building. So this is one of a very early on diagram that talked about how the outdoor-indoor relationship would work and how ventilation would happen. This is kind of a partie diagram of the overall vision of the project. South of Olive Avenue is the new City Hall, and then to the north on the left is the library, and then the other box is the new Department of Public Safety. Prior to phase one, all of the buildings were probably a 5-minute walk. And one of the tenets that Kent wanted us to think about was we want to be able to see each other's door in the final build out of this vision. So now everyone can see that door on, located on top of this plaza. And the other was to lessen the walk. So now this walk in between all three buildings would be 1 minute each. This is kind of a quick axon of those three buildings along this new democratic civic plaza. The granite is a speed table so that it's all flush, so that that entire plaza can connect and there's no curbs or anything else. And then just comparing the existing area versus the master plan thought is essentially the asphalt went down 22% and open space went up. The main reason for that is the master plan showed parking going underground, all three buildings, and trying to reduce some of that asphalt so that we could have more open space. So the final master plan you see on the left with the city hall, the library and Department of Public Safety along that community plaza. And on the right is the scope of work outline for all 6 acres and the 2 buildings. So there was an addition to the Department of Public Safety on the lower left called the EOC, or Emergency Operations Center, which hopefully holds that team down for 15 or so years until that phase comes online. And then the city hall and half of the plaza. So all of those buildings at the north have been taken down, and now there's a new open space park north of the plaza. So now we're going to the phase one of the city hall. So the big idea of the building, 4 stories above and 1 story below, is essentially a bar building that has been split and taken apart and offset a little bit so that the central space is this public stairway and lobby on every floor. And all those floors have smaller tables and unique aspects of the redwood furniture that Kent was mentioning earlier. So the idea is this tree house within redwoods and this grove of trees on their campus. We also worked on models for this client as well to basically help sell the idea and show what we're doing. As Kent mentioned, there's a very large PV. This kind of shows it all right. It's an acre's worth of photovoltaics, almost 1,700 panels on the roof. So this just kind of shows that speed table and plaza looking toward that northern face of the city hall. Are planters and gathering spaces for people on benches and new trees. And the big idea of that democratic plaza will be we have removable bollards where we can actually close down Olive when the city deems that they want a very big event and bring in a whole bunch of vendors and have everybody gather from the city on the plaza. So regarding landscape architecture directly, a tree house and tree roots and what those roots do was really our inspiration and metaphor, not only with the benches and the planters, but also the paving pattern. So we had these diagrams during the master plan and during phase one. Tony, who's online, and Megan, who's also online, you know, kind of led the paving and these benches, and we did these internal maquettes to understand the different shapes and sizes, not only in 3D, but we printed them out and marked on them to understand what the right size and shape would be. We also made full-size maquettes. These are 3-foot modules. We worked with our lighting team to get lights and go into a conference room and darken it to make sure that that light is hidden and that the ground plane would be lit where we couldn't see the light. We also did, and Tony, you can lean in, and Megan, lean in whenever you want, but I think we did almost 20 different negative skate deterrent tests. And that's what you can see in the top middle, trying to avoid adding a third item on top of the bench where people would sit to avoid the skate. So then we worked on paving. One of the things that the city council wanted was a very resilient plaza. So we chose granite, and 2 different granites, you know, out of California. Sierra White and Academy Black. Most people on the call probably know different finishes on the Academy Black make, you know, very different light grays to very dark. So we ended up with 3 different colors to use, thinking about SRI value, also thinking about what is the quickest way for the manufacturer to cut this stone. And instead of doing these curves, you know, we said, all right, we need 3 different sizes to come up with these curves to help be subtle signage and wayfinding for people. So you walk along the darker granite and you gather along the lighter. So this is one of our earlier images of that. And then once we had the bid and the general contractor, Hensel Phelps, was on, they and their subcontractor, Western Tile, our architects and our landscape architects went to the quarry to see the process and to see a mock-up of the CNC benches and the paving to make sure that what our thought is still correct. So one of the items that did happen was we actually ended up changing the width of the negative skate deterrent. So Tony ended up remodeling that. So that was during the day. So then, you know, we all had dinner, and then we came back in the evening back to the plant, and Cold Spring and our lighting designer had connected, and they actually installed the light. But one of the things that we noticed was that from elevation wise, you could still see the light. So one of the things that we ended up doing was remodeling that before they did all 222 modules of these granite walls and benches, so that you wouldn't actually see that line. So this is during construction. And again, the holistic process was really great because our structural engineer, who I think is on this call, Nick, was working with Megan, Tony, and I every week to figure out these details to secure it. The plaza is also half on structure and half on grade, because remember, there is a floor below, which is parking, vehicular parking, EV charging, and bike parking. So we had some things on structural slab and some things on grade. So waterproofing, we also have a building technology system within our company, and they also helped with all of these details and waterproofing for the entire building. And these last 4 images are images that I recently took over the past couple of weeks. Again, we haven't fully accepted the open space just yet, but we're hoping to do that final punch walk within the next couple of weeks, pending rain. But you can see these benches kind of rise out of the plaza. The paving you follow to get to the front door. That happens on the north and the south side of the plaza. And this is an image from the 2nd floor public on structure garden. looking down at the plaza, and you can see the drop off and the bollards to the right. This particular on-structure garden is just for city staff. So this is on the south side. So this is where we have some more shade between the columns that you see in the top. And then the PV comes over to those columns. And then this is our last slide. This is the most recent of the plaza that kind of shows where the buildings were on north of Olive Street. So those have all been raised, and now we've got these DG paths going through. So we didn't want to spend a lot of money on that open space. So that's just hydro-seeded with native wildflowers, and all the pathways are decomposed granite, because we know that phase 2, the library, and then phase 3, the Department of Public Safety, is forthcoming. So this is more of an open space gathering area that the public and city staff can use. So that is the end, and it's now 12:47. So now we have some time for some questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Todd. And thank you, Kent and Jacob, for your great presentation. It's really informative and inspiring, and we can't wait to visit these two places when they are open. Okay, and again, please utilize the chat function to submit any questions. You're still welcome. We have collected a lot of interesting questions. So we will start with 2, which are for Ken and Jacob. The first one is, what are some of the initial community responses after the opening of each civic center?
I'll start with that. Community members love City Hall. So we moved in City Hall last March. It's a very inviting space. It's warm. We've had really good participation in our council meetings in the new council chamber since we started that. So there's been a really warm welcome by the community for the new City Hall building.
And I think similarly, the response has been largely pretty overwhelmingly positive. You know, South San Francisco has been dealing with a lot of growth over the last couple of decades, and I think it's important that we've started to create some new community spaces. So like this is a disruptive project for a lot of people in town, but opening it, I think, was a huge relief for a lot of people, and it's been really, really popular from day one.
That's really great to hear. Thank you. And the next one is, how are the connections between the interior and exterior spaces working for you, the city, and its workers? How are you enjoying the spaces now?
I can start with that. It's nice because when we first moved into March, only one side of the building was open, and 2 weeks ago we opened the other side, which makes parking a little closer and easier access. And so having access from both sides of our building and having these plazas really make it really easy to access. The staff is enjoying it. I think once the weather warms up, we're going to take a lot of advantage of the indoor-outdoor space, and we've already done that. Images Todd showed of the sort of on-structure garden areas and sitting areas have been really well received. We've had some city events there as well, and so really the indoor-outdoor design really works well for our climate in Sunnyvale, and looking forward to this spring when we're going to have a few acres of wildflowers, you know, across from our Civic Plaza. That there's benches, there's just DG paths. People are really going to enjoy that as well. That opened a couple months ago, but it's been pretty wet.
And we had about a week after our opening, our South San Francisco Chamber of Commerce hosts an annual Taste of South City, where a lot of the local restaurants have booths, and you pay and sort of sample all of the cuisine from everywhere. And we opened all the doors up from the event spaces straight into the park, and had some high top tables out in the park, and it felt like a really sophisticated event. in a space that the city has not had. So it's we've only got to enjoy it a little bit before the rain started, but it's been pretty wonderful.
Thank you so much. And the next two questions are for Kent. First one, as the first ground-up net zero energy city hall, how do you plan to monitor and measure the performance of the new projects to facilitate operations?
Yeah, good question. The building has an energy management system, and we do have to. I don't think we get to put the plaque on the wall until after the building's been open for a year. And so, because we haven't finished the microgrid, the whole system isn't activated yet. And so we have to follow up our application for net zero energy after a year of actual use. And so we'll continue to monitor that over the next year and really hope so it's been designed to be net zero. I don't think we have the plaque yet.
Thank you.
Coming soon.
Yes.
And this is still for you, Kent. When phase 2 for the library is designed, how will a library in the digital age function and be programmed compared to a library like 20 years ago?
You know, library programming, we're just starting to do conceptual design for the library, and we're considering a bond measure for November of 2024 to pay for it. So we'll see what sort of community support there are. We've done programming for the library. We really want to incorporate outdoor spaces. When you saw the long-term master plan that Todd showed, there's acres of additional new open space where a lot of the surface parking is. I mean, one of the things we'll have to grapple with, of course, is budget, and it looks good on paper. Can we really afford that much underground parking? And so we're working through that part of it now, and we should have cost estimates in a couple months for phase 2. And then we have to figure out, exactly how we would define the project as we consider going out for a bond.
Thank you, Kent. Next question is for Jacob. What constraints did you run into building on top of a BART tube?
Well, we didn't actually build on top of the BART tube. I mean, structurally, the building is wedged between El Camino and the BART tube. So BART has a sphere of influence. They essentially runs about 12 feet from either side of the BART tube. We thankfully have a good working relationship with BART. And so I didn't mention earlier, but in the late 90s, when the BART extension opened from Daly City to Millbrae and SFO, Colma, South San Francisco, San Bruno, and Millbrae all cut a deal with BART. BART would set aside a certain amount of money to put a multi-use trail on top of the BART tube through those 4 cities. Rather than waiting for BART to fund that dollar amount, the city of South San Francisco went after grant funding to build the trail back then. And this section of the frontage of our property for this project was the only section of the 3-mile path that wasn't contiguous. And so we were able to basically replace the sidewalk at the edge of the property with a multi-use path. And also, I mean, I think as you noticed, BART also owns, a fair chunk of the property. And so we negotiated a deal with BART where we maintain this property as well as the property on top of the tunnel or on top of the tube throughout South San Francisco adjacent to our trail, in exchange for basically a $0 lease, long-term lease with BART. And the BART property and real estate folks have just been really, really wonderful to work with, which is really, I'm really grateful for that because, we don't have, San Mateo County doesn't have a BART director. There's on the BART board of directors, there is nobody that represents San Mateo County because San Mateo County was late to the party as far as having BART within the county. But the staff has just been wonderful to work with.
Thank you for sharing. The next question is for Todd. It's very nice architect problem. So the CNC stone rental looks very nice. At what point do you decide to do CNC versus precast concrete? Is it much
Yeah.
more expensive?
Yeah, I saw that in the chat. So thanks, Sam, for the question. On Sunnyvale, the ground plane actually started as concrete pavers. But we actually had a special city council meeting to talk about resiliency and long-term maintenance. And after showing the difference between concrete pavers and granite pavers, they chose that. So that's what on the ground plane. Regarding the planter and benches, that was always part of it, and we wrote that into the master plan. We also knew that the base of the building would be something that was quite resilient. So what ended up luckily happening, not only due to the pandemic and pricing, but the indoor-outdoor connection, the inside lobby is also all granite, and that flows out to the South Plaza and the North Plaza. And we worked with Cold Spring Granite, which I've known those guys for 25 years or more and have worked with them a lot. But typically what they have done in the past, resiliency and sustainability wise, which wasn't so great, which we changed their thinking, was they would cut stone here in California, ship it to Cold Spring, Minnesota, and then bring it back. And in talks with them, I asked them, if, we really want this to be granite that's less than 200 miles. I think it's 160 miles actually from the manufacturer to Sunnyvale. I asked them to buy a CNC machine for California, and they ended up buying 2. And for this project, they were running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They were using double shifts to get everything ready for this project. And talking to Craig, who most of you on the line probably know, those are still moving. They're not doing double shifts anymore, but they're working 6 days a week with those CNC machines. Now that they're here, I think they're not going to move. And when more landscape architects know and architects know that those are there, I think it's going to really help California projects and become a little bit more sustainable to cut the stone here and manufacture it.
Thank you, Todd. Lastly, I have 2 more questions for all 3 of you. Do you foresee any of the open spaces likely to have unwanted use like homeless condition, and what's your strategy for it?
Could you repeat the question, please? I didn't get the last part of it.
Do you foresee any of the open spaces here would likely to have any unwanted uses like homeless condition, and what's your strategy for it?
Okay, I guess I can start with that. So it's, that's possible. There's ongoing management that's going to have to be applied, at least in Sunnyvale. We have had homeless encampments at the Civic Center. We do have a no camping ordinance, and we do enforce it. And so since the project and the open spaces have reopened, so once we had to do some camp cleanups to start the project when we fenced the whole site. Since we fenced the site, did all the construction and reopened it, that hasn't occurred yet. But we do have a strategy and a team in place. Last year, actually, we hired 2 full-time homeless outreach workers that help find supportive housing for the homeless and engage in services with them. They're available from Santa Clara County and from local nonprofits. And so we do have an active management strategy, but haven't had to deal with it here yet.
And I would say similar to Kent, we have a handful of homeless outreach representatives that look for supportive housing for the homeless in town, and have generally had a pretty good track record with that. We just north of our property line, there is going to be a large multifamily housing development kicking off later this year on some PUC and adjacent to some of the PUC and BART property. And the question is timely because just yesterday we caught wind of some of our contractors getting to the site early to do some final touches before we get final approval on the project. And there were a couple of folks using a couple of the outdoor outlets to cook breakfast. So we're already working with our staff on those issues.
Well, I want to go ahead and wrap us up here. Another big thank you to Todd, Kent, and Jake for joining us today. It's great to see such involved, community engaging projects all up and down the peninsula. And we look forward to being able to visit them soon. So thanks to
Yeah, come
everyone who
visit.
joined us today, and hope to see you at our in-person events coming up in the next few months.
Thanks.
Take
Krista.
care.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Everyone.